identity and access management. So if you remember, let me give you a brief overview of where we are, like where we've been. So we started from understanding cloud computing, AWS DevOps. We broke that introduction down. We did that for a couple of times, right? Before we got here. Once we started AWS, we introduced the global infrastructure, meaning exactly where the places AWS is hosted, right? Which means, when I mean all the places they're hosted, it means everywhere they have like cables connecting, right? All these fiber cables are things you don't see, but they have it. Like it's their global infrastructure. What it means is that even although they are in different regions, but they have connections such that from a region to a region, their data can reach each other following the AWS network, right? From there, the last time we met, we set up our account, and that's why I think I started asking this question: do you have an AWS account? So if you don't have, you need to get one. Just try, make sure you follow up and find a way to get your AWS account. But this is like day 3. So it's time for us to get into business. So what are we going to be talking about? Identity and access management. Trust me, you have an account. Remember, in the last class, you already have an account. But your account, right, you need to know what it takes to manage your account from an identity and access management perspective, right? And I always tell people, in as much as it's just one account, it get complex from there. So, but the foundational knowledge is the same. The fact that it's just like in your account right now. When you created it, you were the root user. You created the account, right? You're the only one that has access to the account. But think about it: if you have like 3 friends that you guys are trying to build a project, right, together, and you wanted them to build in the same account, right? That's when you need more users to come in, right? You need to create additional users. But when they come into the account, what do you expect them to do? Do you want them to do everything like that is possible within the account, or you want them to be able to do some things, right? And that's the whole idea of identity and access management. The fact that you are securing the account. Remember the account, there's a lot that happens there, right? So resources that you spawn up, some of them might cost you money. You don't want somebody to go there and just go and spawn up resources that will cost you money, right? And that's why you streamline access based on maybe the level the person is. Oh, I know this person is a developer. You can give him developer access. I know this person just wants to read things. You can give him like read-only access. But identity and access management is a topic you can, even if you go and write the most complex AWS certification, or you become like the very, very expert person in the cloud, you can't do without IAM, because it's like a core. Everything you get to see it as your complexity increases. But even when services talk to themselves, even when users go in, there is always the concept of identity. Identity is who are you? And there's also the part that talks about access, meaning what do you have access to? So when you go in, we know who you are, right, into the account. The second thing is that what can you now do? So if you go in as an admin, what can you do as an admin? If you go in as a normal user, what can you do as a normal user? Okay. So again, I've changed my style of presentation. I do have the original document, which is what I'm going to share in Discord. But here I'll be presenting PowerPoint, because I just realized that those documents, if I have to share it, it's a bit wordy. Sometimes I'm having to talk about things that I don't really want to talk about. So here I'll just bring out the things that I actually want to talk about and teach you, but you won't miss anything at all. So let's see. So what is IAM? Like I mentioned, I think I already said it: identity and access management. Identity and access management, because everything in AWS comes in the form of an account. There is always an account. There is nothing you can do without an account. And for us in this call, we have already created a free tier account. So for some people on this call, you already have a free tier account, right? So that's an account already. But the whole idea is that you're securely controlling who has access to what. And I think I explained that. Remember that in your account, it's an account, but in there's so many resources. There's compute resources, there's storage resources, there's database resources, there's so many kind of resources, right? Your role in understanding IAM is to understand, like, how do I grant people access? That's one. So who are they? First of all, you have to identify them, right? And then when they are already in the account, what can they have access to? You have to specify those two. And then when they're now in the account, based on their identity and based on their access, they can now that can decide which resources can they interact with in the AWS console, right? So it's like a gatekeeper. What can I do? Who can do what? Who here is the identity of the person. What here is really access, right? And that's why it's identity and access management. And you can't miss it in your journey. Like I always tell people, AWS is they do well at naming things. So identity and access management. So who is the identity? What can you have access to? So gatekeeper, in the sense that who can do what? Okay. So what is the key characteristics? It's really a global service. Remember, I also said that at the beginning. I said IAM is one of the global services, meaning you don't configure IAM per region. You configure it per account, right? So global services are services you configure at an account level, not something you configure based on the region, right? And I think we did talk about that. Regional services, if I install a machine in a region, it's not in a different region. But IAM, in as much as I configure it in an account, it is available all through. Okay? I think we've said that. So it's a global service. So whenever you see anything, anywhere, and they ask you which is regional, which is, just know IAM is a global service. You shouldn't miss that. It's not a regional. It's not scoped to a region. It's a global service. Okay. Why use IAM? There are so many benefits. We've said it because, number one, fine-grained permission, right? So it gives that granular control. And how does it do that? We'll find out. But the whole idea is that in AWS, you can pin down somebody's permission and access to any level you want it. In fact, you can make sure you can pin down somebody's access and make sure that when he goes into the account, there's only one thing he can do, right? So it means that the fact that you can actually more or less like have that grain control is one of the benefits why people love IAM. Okay, and I've always said that. I think I've also mentioned this in the past that IAM is the only way you can manage access inside of the AWS account. There's no other way. There are many things that can bring people in, like Google authentication, as we'll find out, can bring people in, right? But once they're inside the AWS account, you can only use IAM to manage the identity and access management. So also security-wise, we know if you can decide the identity, decide which resource they have access to, what it means it prevents like it prevents unauthorized actions, right? So what it means is that you are only authorized to do what you have permission to do, right? What about accountability? Yeah, the thing is that that's the beauty of many of the services we'll see as time goes on. But one thing you should understand again is that it's not just about access, it's not just about identity, it's also being able to track who did what. So, for example, somebody deleted a machine that was servicing your business, and all of a sudden your business, your customers could not access your application again, right? You should be able to know who did it, and that's one thing that IAM can help you do because there's a concept called Cloud Trail that allows you to Cloud Trail that helps you to trail requests in the cloud, right? So IAM is also not an exception, which means that whenever anybody does something within the account, CloudTrail can tell you, right? It can tell you exactly what action the person performed, who did it, right? But the who there is really why IAM comes in because the who is what helps you to identify who was the person. Is it a user? Is it a role? And what permission does that person have? So you can find all that information. The whole idea is that it brings about accountability, right? Scalability is also there, right? The idea is that you can, in one place, just manage access for everybody, right? You can manage access, you can put them in a group, and you can more or less like give them a permission that holds them together as a group. So it means that even as you scale, maybe you don't need to care about the individual user again because if there's already a group that covers them, you can just throw the user in that group. But we'll see how that plays out. But these are all just the benefit. Cost effectiveness also, IAM is completely free, right? IAM is completely free, so you don't pay anything for using the IAM service. So it's one of those services that you never go into the console and see any bill, and they'll tell you you were charged for using IAM, right? Just so you know, throughout your learning, just know that the IAM service is free. The users, the resources, all those things, they are free. The only thing you pay for is basically whatever the person installed or whatever the person started, resources, the actual resources. But the IAM itself as an entity is free. Okay. What else? Now, let's talk about, so we've talked about the benefits, right? We've introduced IAM as a subject. We've talked about the benefits. Now, there are two major kind of users in an account. So like I told you, everything in AWS as it relates to IAM, there are like two users. There are two categories, broad categories of users. So when you created your account, so for most of the people who joined me in the last call, when you created your account, you were the root user, right? If you remember, you provided your email address and you provided a password, right? And that gave you an account. So you are currently the root user. And really, that's the administrative user. It means it is that person who has like the administrative access on that particular, what do you call it, on that in that particular account. So you have like the administrative access. So the root user is the person who created the account, right? At this level, just know that you created, right? You give an email address, you give a password, and you created an account. You are the root user. It means that there's no other person in that account that is more powerful than you. It is you that can decide, that can give people more power as time goes on. Okay. There is something here that you see throughout your AWS journey. Never use that root user. So you see that your user that you have, never use it for your daily task. So never use it for like setting up EC2 machines. Never use it for creating buckets. You don't need to do that. So the root user should not be used for that kind of things, right? That's why there is room for you to create additional users to do not more or less like all those your tasks that you would want to do inside your account. So remember, in your account, many things will happen. You probably need a bucket, you probably need a server, you probably need a database, right? All those kind of tasks is not what you use your root access for. Your root access is majorly for administrative stuff. Please don't forget that. You see that throughout your AWS journey. So you see it in many of your certification exams that the root user is the critical user you cannot be using for your day-to-day activity. Okay. So when you now leave root user, what else? There is now the concept of IAM users. And in your case, you have just one account, right? But if you go into your user management, as we'll see as part of this demo here, is that you can create additional users. And those users can go into the account and do what they can based on the permission you have given to them. So they can only do the things that you have permitted them to do. So think about it. You as the root user is managing other users, right? Okay. So, and remember, sometimes these users are in the form of a human who uses the console. But sometimes also, it could be application, it could be services that are using the user's credential. Okay. But all that we'll find out as time goes on. Okay. But just so you know, majorly there's the root user, you created the account, and there is the normal IAM user, who is most times created by the root user or someone with an administrative access. So when you also think about that user, they pretty much have like specific limited permissions, like I mentioned. So when you create the user, you have to say, what can this user do when they get into the account? and you will see it. It's part of the things we're going to demo. But just know that root user, you have access to do everything. But when you start creating IAM users, you can tell them exactly what they can do in an account. Okay. So for day-to-day, principle of least privilege, you have to use IAM users for your day-to-day activity. You only use the root user when you want to do anything administrative. Okay. I think I think this is clear at this stage. So for your day-to-day operations, use the IAM user. For your administrative access, whatever administrative you want to do, maybe you want to create more users or you want to do anything administrative, that's when you use the root user. Okay, that's clear. I think it is. Um, so when you now think about it, so we have a root user, which you have. You don't have a user yet. We will create one as part of this class. But when you think about it, how do you think users access the application? Like the AWS account itself is there. I'm not sure what you are going to be building as part of like once you gain the knowledge you are gaining here, what you want to try, what you want to build, right? But again, those applications, people are going to need to use them, right? How do they usually use them? So here, just introduction, like how people access the application. Number one, the people usually, for the most part, they sign in, right? They sign in with their IAM credentials. And I'm sure you as a root user, yes, you signed in, right? When you created your account, you can still go back, you can put your email, you can put your password. It gives you console access, right? It gives you access into the account. That's one way, right? That's one way. But again, we talked about the IAM user, right? The IAM user also has two ways they can access the account. We'll see that as time goes on. But just so you know, they can also gain console access, right? So when you create a user, you can assign at that point whether you want the user to be able to access the console or you only want them to be able to programmatically access applications on the AWS account. So those are the two ways. So one is console access. Just know console is that UI, the account UI that you already know, that you're already familiar with. So that's console. Programmatic means they are not in that console, but maybe they're using code or an application to access it, right? So in console, most times the root user, you only provide your username and your password, right? But for the IAM user, you need to tell us what's the account ID. You need to tell us the username. You need to give us the password. So three things. And then for programmatic access, that's when you provide like an access key, a secret access key. You give it a credential because you are using code to access the account. Okay. Now there is also another flavor, which is more or less like users that you create via identity center, the identity center. Those ones are different from the usual users that we create. You can also go to the identity center to create users. And those ones, if they want to log in, they'll go through a portal, they'll still provide their username and their password. Okay. And then there is the concept of federated user. I won't go into most of these things. I'm not going to go into them in details because we'll see them at subsequent places. But whenever you see federated just means the person was brought from somewhere else. And I'm going to show you what it looks like in the next slide. Federated is just like you're using something that you already have like a way of logging in somewhere else and you're using that to access your AWS account. One easy way is just if you look at Google, you already have an account with Google. In most organizations, your same Google account can lead you to your AWS account once you have that federation set up. Okay, so Active Directory and all that. So more or less like external IDPs. So user federation, this is exactly what it looks like. Basically, the person who is the users, as they are there, they already have like Google Workspace. Maybe they already have like a Google account that they're already using. Maybe their organization already uses Google, right? So if they want to log in, they'll go to the identity center, for example, and say they want to log in. And then it will tell them to log in using Google. And once they log in using Google at step 2, you see that it goes to identity center, and then it gives them like, there's already an integration, and it tells them, oh, we know you're coming from Google, but this is what you can do. And then you can do everything that you want to do within the account. Just whenever you have federation is something you are federated from somewhere else. So sometimes you're federated from Active Directory, you're federated from Google, any kind of SSO login that is out there. Okay. Yeah, so just understand that I'm just introducing it. We're not really going into details, but when you get federated, just know that federated is not users you create within the account. They are users that exist outside. So if you see, it's like an external identity provider. That's what they call EIP. It's like an external identity provider, right? You're already logged in there. You're already a user there, and then you can use that same access to gain access to your account. But it requires extra configuration. So if I now look at it, when you think about like what are the core IAM components, and we'll now go into them bit by bit, where we'll do a demo. But there are really 4 major components. So there's like a user, there is like a group, there is like policies, and there's like roles, right? And I put this diagram here because it comes from the AWS documentation itself, and it shows you exactly, how it plays, like how it interplays as time goes on. So if you see it here, there's a principal, and the principal is exactly the components that I've mentioned. So the person is a user, the person is a role, or it's like a federated user, right? And the person would usually do 2 things. He comes in and says, this is my request information. For example, I want to access this set of resources using these particular actions or operations, right? And then there is like an authorization phase where the first thing AWS is doing is trying to first identify you. Who are you, right? So once they identify you, the next thing will be, I know you now. Like I know you are this user. The question is that what can you do in this account? So that's what the authorization step does. So identifies you first as a user, finds out what you can do. So it sees all your permissions and your policies, everything, it does all that. And there's a hierarchy. There's so many, there's like a chain that you look at to identify what you can do in the account. And then based on that, it looks at, what are the operations you can do in that account, and then based on that, it knows exactly if you can access the resources. So if I say I want to list the objects in a particular S3 bucket, right? If I come through this flow, I'll first go in, and the AWS system itself is going to see, who am I? Okay, you are Brainial. Okay, Brainial, I see you want to access an S3 bucket. I know who you are, but let me check first. And it looks around and tries to find out all the policies that affect you. And once it sees it, it finds out if you have access to access the bucket you're trying to access. And once it can verify that yes, you do have access, then you get access to the bucket. So just to know, this is like high level, me just showing you like everything together. Like if you see there's like the intro structure, right? This is really like at a glance what you are doing when you go into a particular account. Okay. Um, okay, we'll go back to the user policy, but let's start from okay. I think yeah, we'll go back to that. So let's start from the core component, which is users and groups. Remember, we're going to do a demo. We're going to show you everything, but again, I need to solidify the concept first before I can show you exactly what that translates to in the console, right? So when you see core IAM components here that I mentioned, users and groups, who is a user? I think I've told you, a user is just a human, basically, for the most part, that needs to use the application. But sometimes, again, a user, for example, like I've mentioned, can gain access to the console. Some users don't need to gain access to the console. Um, so because why? If you create a user, for example, and say, okay, for this user, I don't want them to go into the console, but they still need to access the set of service, right? You can use their more or less like the access keys and IDs to grant an application access into the account. So there's usually the user part. So, and if you check it, there is usually like a unique username, right? More or less like a password or access key. So there are unique things that the person will need to gain access to the AWS account. What about a group? So if you see in that diagram, you see on the left, you see that I've written Bob, Alice, Joe. They are all users, right? And we'll create our first user after this, whatever I'm showing you right now. We'll create our first user. But you see there's a group, and there is on the left, on the right of it, there is now groups, right? And you see I broke them into groups. The whole idea is that a user can belong to many groups, okay? So there could be a group called testers. There could be a group called developers. There could be a group called, finance, and then you can have users within that group, okay? And the beauty of it is that one person can be in multiple groups. So I can be in finance, I can be a tester, and then every permission that those groups have, I'll have it. That's the whole idea. So just think about it that group is a way to more or less like simplify the permissions you are giving people. Because I have to give Alice permission, give Bob permission, right? But they're both in the same group. Why should I have to do it individually? I can just put them in the same group and give them a group permission, right? So it means that I can manage their permission at a group level. So just know that in your journey, group is just a way to manage access for a large number of people. And it's very, very important because if you have to do it one after the other, it's going to be a bit complex. And that's why sometimes it's better you just group people, right? So I know there'll be developers. You could even have like senior developers group. You could have mid-level developers group. Just depend on what you really want them to do in the console, and then give them access based on that group level. And then any permission that the group has access to, any user that is in that group will have same permissions. Okay. And users can belong to multiple groups. And like I said, users, they inherit group permission. So it means that if I belong to group A and I belong to group B, right? Whatever permission is in group A, whatever permission is in group B, I would inherit both of them, right? So it corresponds to my more or less like my overall permission within the account as time goes on. Okay. So I need to show you what that would look like. So basically, if you remember, I think I've showed you this before. This is my account. So let's talk about users and groups. And remember, we've already gotten to that point where we are going to be doing practicals. So this is me. This is my account. Like I've mentioned, if you go into your account and you just see a name, that means you're in the root account. Okay, that means you're already at that point in the root account. I don't think that is showing correctly. So maybe I should move my screen to the middle so I can see it. So what I mentioned is that if you see on the right screen there, you see first of all it's global. We've said that IAM is global. And secondly, you can see Brainial is correctly written there. That's just to show that I'm the root user. Because if I wasn't the root user, it will show me something else at the account name. Okay, so I'm the root user. So what else do I need to do? If I go in here, I pretty much need to do, so I need to go to IAM and, I'll go to users. Here, there is one user which I've created a long time ago, and I think that's what I've been using for the most part to do my demo. But I can also create a new user, right? I can call this one a TikToker. Yeah, that's the user I really want to do. Now you have to take note of this line here, this very important one. It says provide user access to the AWS management console. It's not a must. It's an optional field, right? So it's optional. When you say provide access to user, it just means that do you want the person to have access to this console like you do? That's just what it means. And because some people maybe they don't need access to the console. Maybe they just want to use code to interact with your account. But in this case, they're asking the question. And I know, because of the way I want to show you some things, I know I want the user to be able to see a console. So I'm just going to put, yes, I want to. It says I should use Identity Center, recommended, but I'll still choose to just create a standard IAM user, okay, in this case. It's saying I should generate like a auto-generate password. No, I want to specify my own password, okay? And then, there's something that says there's an option that says maybe the user should create Because think about it, if you are the root user and I'm trying to create user for someone else, right? There's an option here that says the user must create a new password at the next login, which means anytime they log in for the first time, they should create a new password. But in this case, I don't really want them to do. But you can also have that option here, such that once they log in, they can create a new password. But I don't want that. So here I'm just going to do this, and then I'm just going to do. I'm just hoping that I. Okay, so I've written a custom password there, and then I'll try to do next, basically. So now it says here that I should add the user to groups, right? Right now, I don't really need to add the user to a group. I'm just creating a standard user in the account, so it doesn't belong to any group. But again, I need to set. So it's that I'm doing, like I'm copying permission, or this is really about the group, right? But what if I want to do more or less like I can even copy permissions from a user? So there's already an existing user here. I can copy that person's permission and copy it over, right? But again, I can also add the user to a particular group, and I've already told you that a group gives the person a group permission, right? So whatever permission is in that group, the user will get it. But in this case, maybe I just want to attach policies directly. And again, as we go further, we'll explain some of these things. Usually, like I said, you are the root user, but you still need someone else to do day-to-day activity, right? As time goes on. So in this user's case, I'm just giving them administrative access. So I'm just trying to say, I want this person to also be like me, right? But not a root user, but I want him to be able to do administrative things within the account. So that's fine. It works for me. So I'll do next. And that's basically it. So I'll create a user, right? So now the user has been created, right? So you can see there's like a sign-in URL here that the user can use to log in. So a user has been created, and it's as simple as that, basically. So a user is just someone who either has console access or programmatic access. In this case, we created the user to have a console access, meaning the person can also come here, right, and log in. So now that we've created a user, let's go back to that. Let's go back here. I think I can do AWS console and login. I think I'm already open. Like I have a login here. So let me try to sign in. So this is my account ID here. Remember, if I was signing in as a root user, I need username and password. There's a different option here. So always know the user you're signing in with. Sometimes people sign in with a root user and they'll think they're signing in with a basic user. In this case, when you see yourself providing the account details, you're providing your username and you're putting your password, know that you're signing in as a regular user. Okay. So in this case, I think I created the person as TikToker, right? I'm here and I did create a password. I hope it takes me in. I know that was going to be. Okay, I was able to get in. I was telling myself, I hope I remember the password. So you can see, can you see that here it shows TikToker at the account ID? So it's different. If you see TikToker at the account ID, it's different from the one that we saw before. The one that we saw before is the root user. It won't have TikToker at the account, but here it's a TikToker. But the thing is that if I actually go to SNS, because in the beginning, if you remember, this person, remember we gave him an administrative access. We basically said he's really administrative. So he can actually go in and see things. So he can go, obviously, he can move around. He can even create, he can start creating things. Nothing is limiting it. So he can create whatever he wants to create because it's an administrative access. He has administrative access, right? But what if we go back and we say here, so there is a user, console, what is it saying? Yeah, return to users list. Downloaded this user's password. I know the password. So this is the TikToker. It just showed me you logged in ago. It showed me the administrative access. That's what the person has, right? But again, have you ever thought? Do you know what will happen if I remove this access from the person? Do you know? Like if I go back to this account and I try to do this, more or less like I go back. I know there's really you can see all of a sudden because I removed administrative access. Can you see what it's showing? Most of the places I will go to now, it will be showing error. It will be showing error now because why? I just removed the user's administrative access. So meaning that user can no longer be able to do most things in the account unless I show them, I tell IAM what I want the user to be able to do. So right now on my other account, there is a user, but it doesn't have any permission. So it means if you don't have any permission, there's really nothing you can do within the account. Okay. And on the other side, you can see that before it was showing green, but now I can't even do anything. Everywhere I go to, it's going to be showing red because I don't have permissions to do most of the things that I want to do. So if you understand what I just shared, there is really a user, right? The root user created additional users. And then the additional user was given a permission to log into the account. Based on that permission, the user could decide, based on the permission that user was assigned, the user can operate within the account. But remember, it's the same account. It's just that it's a TikToker account here, while in the other account, in the other user, it's the power user access, right? Like the root user. Okay? So I think that's clear. So let's go back to the presentation, then I'll show you what next. So we've gone through this, we've created a user. What is now policy? So if you think about it, if you remember when the root user created a user, he added like a permission to it. When we did that, we did give like a permission, right? So that's really policies, right? So in AWS, there's a concept of policies. Policies, like I told you, I said identity and access are two things, right? Identity was the TikToker that we created. The TikToker user is the identity, meaning we've identified that this person is a user, right? And then access comes in the form of policy, right? And when we tested, we showed a very simple example where we gave them administrative policy, right? So what does the I know we didn't really go into details to look at that. We didn't look at that policy in detail, and that's why we're doing this. So it's just a JSON document. Basically, it defines permission. It says this person is allowed to do this, or this person is not allowed to do this in an account. So it looks at a resource, and it can tell you that the TikToker can do this, is allowed to do this, or is also denied from doing this. Okay. So like I said, the core function here is basically it decides who can do what. So remember, the who there is the identity. There's a user. But the question is that what can they do once they get into the account? And there's really like when we'll see the policy document, but it comes in a very standard form. So there's like the statement ID, there is the effect, there's the action, there is the resource, the principal, and the condition part, right? That tells you exactly what the person. It's not, like I said, it's a JSON document, right? But the JSON document has a format that you have to follow, and it's from that format that the policy can tell that this is what you have access to doing in a particular account. Okay. So like I said, it has version, it has statement ID, just a unique ID to identify the statement. It has effect, and the effect here is allow or deny, and then there's like the action list that shows, what can you do, right? Based on the particular service. So maybe for a bucket, you can see the bucket, or can you destroy the bucket, or can you all the actions that are possible. And then there's really for a particular resource. You can say for this particular resource. You can also specify. You can specify even multiple resources also. And then the principal here is who does this statement apply to, right? And there's also a conditional block, optional, but there is room for you to have it. And the conditional block is just something that can show that based on this condition is what I want you to use in evaluating this user's policy. Okay. So this is a very simple example, and I will share it to you on this call. Is that these are things you don't need to memorize. You don't need to memorize. That's why I put two links there. You basically need to get from this call the structure of what a policy is. But if you so generate one, there is so many tools out there that you can use to generate within AWS and outside of AWS. And I'll show you two of them, right? Two examples. But what you basically need to get from this call is what is a policy? What is in a policy? And then how can I create one myself? Okay. So if you see like here now, I said S3 read-only access to a specific bucket, that's the statement ID, meaning that's the name I'm calling that particular policy, right? The effect here, like I mentioned, is allow, meaning I'm allowing this person. Who am I allowing? There is a user there. So there's a principal, and it's an AWS principal. It has an ARN, and we'll talk about ARN as time goes on. But you can see it uniquely identifies someone within an account called a read-only user. In our own example, we created a TikToker, but here it's like a read-only user, right? And we are saying, what are the actions, right? We are saying S3 get object, S3 list object. And then for the resources, we've also listed the resources that the person can get. Especially in this case, we're talking about S3, right? So we're saying for this bucket, you should be able to list the object, and you should also be able to get the object. You should be able to list the bucket, and you should also be able to get objects within that bucket. But what I really want you to get from here is really the structure of a policy. And it has these entities. And optionally, there is like a conditional block. The conditional block here is saying that the source IP of the person must be this IP address, and the person must have like multi-factor authentication, enabled for the person to be able to perform this action. Okay. So if I was to read what is on the right, it says this policy allows a specific IAM user to view content of a particular S3 bucket and list its objects, but not modify or delete anything, right? So if I was just to attach this policy to someone, the person would only just be able to get all the objects in an S3 bucket and list the bucket, but not do more than that. Okay. And then there is where we added, condition to say if the person has multi-factor authentication. So, and I'm going to basically show you, like I said, you just need to understand the structure. Most policies come like this. They come like they have this element that I mentioned, but you don't need to put them in your head. Like, oh, know all the policies. No. If you know the structure, that's all you need. Because why? There are things like this. So if you go to like policy generator, you can generate any kind of policy you want. So you can say, for example, you're creating an IAM policy. You want it to be allowed. You want to choose a particular service. Let's look for S3, for example. You can say S3 in this case, do you want to allow all actions, or you just want, in this case, I think we said get object, right? That was the demo we did. So you can do get object, you can say which resources, in this case, maybe we're using all. Do we want to add any condition? There is a list of conditions. In as much as you are dealing with a bucket, there's a list of permission here that you can add, right? That tells you exactly the conditions you can add. And then once you are done, you can basically generate the policy. Add one or more statements above to generate. I thought I did add it. Where is the statement? Okay, yeah, add statement. Like I said, a statement, the statement that I showed you before, you can have multiple of them. So here is saying we have to add. So here we already have one statement. We can have multiple statements, right? And we can generate policy. So it's similar to what we recently had. But if you notice, there is the SID function component of it, which is like the statement ID. There is the effect. In this case, it's just allow, right? And there is like the action that says, get object, and we are saying for all resources. But if you check where we're coming from, the resources there, we streamlined it further. We said not all resources, but this set of resources. Okay. So like I said, you don't need to memorize it. So if I also go into the second one here, there is also room, right, for you to generate any kind of policy. So never you think that, oh, I need to put all these things in my head. No, the knowledge you basically need to know is what is a policy, what are the components of the policy. But when the time comes when you really need to narrow down your account to a specific policy or exactly, and you want to give out the right access, and when the time comes, there are tools that does it for you. If you don't, you can craft yours yourself. I mean, but if you didn't just want to go through that stress, you can go to some of these websites and generate the policy. Like this one is, this one is specifically from AWS, and then this one is, like an outside tool. But you can come here, choose like a particular resource, choose the policies you want to apply, and then just click OK, right? So that answers that part. Um, so now when you now think about policies, what are the type of policies that exist? So you remember we told you a policy is just a JSON document, right? That has those entities that we explained. So there is like there's like the resource ARN, for example. There's the effect, what you want the person to do, all those things. But there are different types of policies. All the policies, regardless of their differences, will still have those elements. But here I'm trying to tell you what are the kind of policies that exist in AWS account. Number one, there is like the manage policy. So when I created the user at one point, I created a TikToker user. If you notice, I attached a policy to it. I will go back to it to go and see it. I attached a policy to it. I did not create that policy. I didn't create it. I only attached, right? So that's a case where you are using an AWS managed policy, meaning it's a policy. AWS has already created it, right? And I feel when I looked at the policy, maybe it meets my need. Why should I have to reinvent the wheel and create one myself, right? So I just used it. So there is a policy from AWS. It already does what I want to do. There is no point me creating my own. I just use it, right? So that's the concept of AWS managed policies. Throughout your journey, you're going to see it because sometimes you just need to, whatever you're doing there's already a policy out there that does it. Why can't you just use it? So that's why you use it, an AWS managed policy. So it's predefined by AWS. There's also like a customer managed policies. So what it means is that same policy, if I felt it didn't meet all my need, I could create my own. And once I create my own, it becomes a customer managed because I created it. I'll manage it. I can choose to delete it whenever I want to delete it and all that. So it becomes a customer managed policy. So I'm the one that created it. Okay. So there is some that AWS has created. There are some I will create, right? But there's the last flavor, which is more or less like an inline policy. Inline policy is usually discouraged for the most part, but people still find cases where they use it. So for example, I could create a policy for just a user, right? And just give him that policy. But the thing is that because it's inline, it is attached to the user or the entity. What it means is that if I delete the user, the policy is also deleted. So there's no room for reuse. Compared to like a customer managed policy where I create a policy and I can always reuse it everywhere. If I do like an inline policy, I'm attaching it to an entity. And the life cycle of that policy is determined by the life cycle of the entity. So if the entity was to be deleted or removed from the app, the policy will also be deleted. So have you seen the three flavors? There's one that AWS gives you. You don't pay for it. It's already there for you. You can create your own. And then there is like the inline one, right? Where you need to attach to a user. Okay. So like a best practice here, you always prefer a managed policy. You prefer a managed policy. Managed policy is already there. Why should I reinvent the wheel? Okay. So with that out of the way, let's go back to our user account. I think there is an account here that was open, right? Okay. So let's go back. If you remember, this is still me. I'm still the root user at this point. So we've talked about the concept of a managed policy. Now I'm just going to show you what all that looks like. So if you see this user right now, this is the TikToker user we created. It doesn't have any permission. If you see his permission is blank, right? There is one option, which is to add permissions to that person. So one is I just basically needing to, in this case, for example, I told you there's an option to add user to group, there's an option to copy permission, but I just want to attach a permission. So when you see yourself doing this, and I'm picking from policies that already exist, and in this case, you can see a lot of them that says AWS managed, AWS managed, AWS managed, right? So whenever you see me doing any of this, I'm using a managed policy. But sometimes before you use a managed policy, it is good for you to even see the policy itself. What does the policy look like? You need to first of all have an idea of it. So I've gone to see that managed policy. What does it look like? I want to look at it in JSON. Basically, it does one thing. It says allow star on star. That's what it does. So that's a very powerful policy. That's really one policy that I use for my more or less like I use it for my non-root account, but I want it to have administrative privileges. So if you notice, when I do my presentation, I have like the root account, but I have another account that I use for my day-to-day. That account is an administrative account. So I can give it this policy because you can see it has star on everything, right? So it has star on SNS. So it has star basically on all the services. So it is allowed to do everything on every resource. If you check where we're coming from, if you check where we are coming from, you notice that we did give the user a particular administrative policy, but we've also removed it recently. And then if you check this policy, it's basically action star on all resources. But if you remember the one I also shared, you can limit this action. You can say, I only want you to do this, right? And I also want you to do this particular action on a particular resource, okay? So that's the concept of a managed policy, okay? What about a policy that we create ourselves? So what I can create my own, that's what it means. It means that I can come here, I can say, basically, I want to create my own policy. So I can come here and be like, what do I want? Maybe I want SNS, right? I want SNS. In this case, I want Yeah, SNS. And here maybe I'm just lazy. I want him to be able to do everything about SNS. Maybe that user, that particular person is my SNS expert, and I want him to be able to do everything around SNS. So I'm creating in this case, I'm saying all resources, all within everything, like just be able to do anything related to SNS, right? I'm not even creating any filter, and I'm like, next, I'm going to call it customer managed, okay, managed policy in this case, right? So, and then I'll call it this is a customer policy. Okay, so the description is there. You can see it's here. This is the policy has full access to SNS, right? And then I'll create the policy. Remember, I only created the policy. The policy is now there. I've created one, right? But it doesn't mean anyone has access to it yet. Until I attach it to someone, it is of no use, you know. But I can go back to that user that we created, right? I can go back to the user and say, TikToker, I think you're my SNS guy. You're the guy who can do SNS for me. Why not I give you more permissions? Right now you don't have any, right? So I can do add permission, right? And I can go here and say attach permissions directly. And if I look at customer, I search for customer managed. Did you see this? Do you see how it says customer managed, right? It's different from AWS managed, because customer managed means you are the one that created it, right? So you can also use that. So I can assign this to him and then do next. And that's it. I've added that permission. So now this user now has the customer managed policy attached to him, right? What happens if we go back to his page? Maybe we should try and see. If we go back here, let's see what happens. Yeah, he obviously can't do some things, right? He can't do something, but if you have to look at it properly, it's not like he's not allowed to do so many. Like if you notice, this is around log group, this is around user blah. So it's not related to SNS. And how you know is that if I come here and I close all this and I create a topic, if I come here and I create a topic, let's see, let's just disregard this for now. Let's say hello world topic. Let's just call it whatever. Just so you know that it doesn't really, whatever is showing there doesn't really. Right now I can't do many things, right? So it's a what was I trying to do? Yeah, I was just trying to create a standard topic. I don't really care about anything. If I do create, did you see that I was able to create a topic? I was able to create a topic, right? Here, if I go back to topics, I was able to create because at the root side, right, we've created a custom managed policy, right? And we've attached the user to it. And we'll be like, okay, this user can do everything around SNS. And he was successfully able to create a topic. But if I send this and I go to another service, I'm thinking of a faster service to create. Like if I know some will take time, but let me just do, if I wanted to do any other service, just so you know. Maybe Lambda is a faster one. I think Lambda will create very fast. So let's go to Lambda instead of EC2. Let's see what else can the person do. So if I go to Lambda function and I try to create a new one, can you see? I can't even. You can already see it's there. But let me just say use a blueprint, blah blah blah, whatever. Just create function, test function. Let's see what happens. Just forget about the naming for now. Can you see what is here? You know, I can't do it, right? Because even for you to create a Lambda function, you need to pass role, you need to create, maybe there's an IAM role that needs to be attached to the Lambda, but I don't have permissions to do that. So you can see that there is like a managed policy out there that the user is using that is tied to this user and is what determines what the person can do. But again, I can use like an AWS managed policy that has many of the permissions that I need and just put everything together. Okay. So what else can we do? What if this is one way I'm just trying to show you everything, right? So now remember that the guy couldn't do anything. So what if we go back here and say, we go back here? That's the concept of, now you can see outside that there is the concept of also like an inline policy. So let's go back there. So let's understand that. If you remember before, I have attached policies to him here, right? I've added permissions, right? But there's also room for you to create policy. So here you're going to create like an inline policy. Remember I told you that there is managed, AWS managed, that's one. There is you customer managed, meaning you own the policy, you create it, you choose to delete it whenever you want to. And then there is the third flavor of it, which is the inline policy. But remember that once I create this policy, it is attached to the TikToker user. It means that if I delete the user, that policy is also going to be deleted. You can already see the disadvantage, right? Because the one that is managed, even if I create a fresh user, I can attach that policy to the person. But for this one that is attached to the TikToker, it's only for the TikToker. So if I delete the TikToker, that policy is also deleted. Okay, so those are the three flavors of policies you can see. But let's see, what does this one look like? So what if we go back and do same thing that we're doing before? So just to simplify the example, let's go back to type this. So we want SNS, we want all action, we want all, right? And then we want to do next, right? And it says what's the name? I'll call it inline policy. So because I want to really just attach it to the user. What is this one? There is something here showing. I don't know. Is it from the Chrome or what? Is it from the browser? I don't even know what that is. But let's go back. I needed to really remove it. I'm not sure. What does this one look like? Okay. Okay, it's cool now. So inline policy is there. I'm going to create the policy. Now, if you go back, right, you can see there is one that has been attached as a customer managed, but there's also one that is customer inline, right? So what if I delete the customer managed policy, this one, and I remove it? And now I left the inline policy there, right? One thing you should know is that if I go back to the other page and I go back to SNS, I'll still be able to do what I was doing. Because although I've removed the customer managed policy and I've given it a user policy, I still will be able to do what I was doing before. So if I go back here and I still wanted to create a new topic, in fact, I can go back here and delete this LOL topic. I can't delete it. Why not? Because I have the permission. It's gone. I can't. So remember, I removed the managed policy from it and I gave it an inline policy, but yet I was still able to delete the topic that I created before. Why? It's the same thing. It's the same policy that both have. I've just attached them in different ways. One I used managed, customer managed, and one I'm using like an inline policy. So by now, I think you now understand what a managed policy is. Managed policy, AWS has it. In most cases, you check before you create your own. Check, there might be a policy that has exactly what you need. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't create a new one. But if you want more or less like custom policy, right? You can create a custom one, put everything you want, all the actions, all the resources that the person needs access to, and create it, right? The reason you do that is because you want it to be reusable, right? Maybe you want to attach it to multiple users. And then the last one is inline policy. The only reason why you want to use inline policy is you just want to create it one-off, more or less like a one-off, right? So you create it only once and you don't really care. You don't care. So in this case, if I delete the user, that inline policy is also going to be deleted because it's only attached to that user. Okay? If it makes sense, let me know if it makes sense in the comment section. So we've talked about all the policies. We've talked about the policy structure. It's no big deal. Just know those blocks. But if you ever want to generate policy, there's so many things you can actually use to generate policy. So it's not something you need to put in your head. You basically just know that for S3, what are the things and what are the kind of policies that I need? For maybe EC2, what are the kind of policies that I need? But there is room for you to create those policies. Okay, it's not something you need to put. There are some things I always tell people: don't put it in. You like don't hold it there, right? Just understand the structure. You can always generate policies. So it's not a big deal. Now there's something I've also showed you about groups. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back to where we're coming from. So we were here, right? So there's still the TikToker user. If you notice, TikToker user is there, right? But it has an inline policy at the moment. It has an inline policy at the moment. So what if we go and now create a group? I know I've told you about groups before. This is a good way to introduce group. So now I can create a new group, right? I can call them SNS manager, right? Let me just give it a nice name. So SNS manager, that's the name of the group. For now, yes, I'll give TikToker as the person, right? And then I'll create the user group. I'll create a group. What does it want? Yeah, I've created an SNS manager, right? So I've created an SNS manager as a user, right? Sorry, as a group. So I've created an SNS manager group, right? But if you go in now, there is no user. Remember we talked about group is just a way for you to give multiple people same permission instead of creating it individually, right? So here I've created an SNS user. There is one an SNS manager group, and there's one user inside. But when I check permission, does the group have any permission? No, it does not, right? It does not have. So one thing I can do is maybe I can attach my policy here, right? And then you look at the customer managed one, the one we created before that we managed, right? They're still here. And then I'll attach the policy. So now what it means is that this SNS manager is a group I've identified as people that will manage anything around my SNS service. So I've given them a customer managed, my own managed policy that I know has access to manage and do anything around SNS. Okay. So what will now happen? Let's go back to the user that we had before. The user is still here, right? There is a TikToker here. So if I go in there, what do you think I can do? It already shows that the guy belongs to one group and he's an SNS manager, and there is a customer managed policy attached to it. So what it means is that if I look at the permission that I'm giving it myself, I can delete this inline policy. If you remember we gave it an inline policy before, but now I can remove it. Why? Because there is already a policy being attached here, right? Sorry, I think I left it. Let me go forward. Because why? That same policy is already given by the SNS manager, so there's no point me doing it again. So he's inheriting that. Okay. So if I go back to the old page where we were, what do you think will happen if I try to create another standard SNS topic? Call it hello world, call it whatever, test world, and just say testing basically. And I come here and I'll be like, great. Yeah, the guy still can do whatever he's doing. But if you check, he's no longer getting this permission from customer. He's no longer getting it from the inline policy again. He's now getting it from the group, right? So remember, I told you that a user can inherit permissions from the group, right? And again, depending on how many groups the user belongs to, the user can get multiple permissions. Okay. Now, TikToker belongs to one group. Right now, he's getting the permission. Let's go and create a new group. Let's create a new group. So what we are going to do in that new group, remember, I'm juggling between the two users. Sometimes I come to my root user. Like I've told you, the root user is for administrative. So here is where I plan who has access to what can the person do in an account. But the other account is where I now leave them to do whatever they want to do. So for the people who want to have business with SNS, let them have business with SNS. You can create those level of divisions, and have people log into the account, and you can be rest assured that yes, they won't do beyond the permission you have given them. And that's really the concept of least privilege access, right? You're not giving them what they don't need. You are giving them just enough permission for them to do their work. Okay. So now let's create a new group. So let me create a new group and call that group my admins. I'll just call it my admins. Basically, that's my admins. And TikToker is also my admin, right? And then I want to give him administrative access. This one, and do create user group. Now I've created a new group called my admins, right? And I've given them administrative access. Remember, there's also an SNS manager, right? And there's also an SNS permission in there. What do you think would happen to this new user, the TikToker that we have? So if we go back to user and we check TikToker, right? You see it has, administrator access. Where did he get it from? He got it from my admins group. He now has customer managed policy. He got it from the SNS manager. How do you think that would translate to in his own page? So if I go back to home, right, what I was doing before, you notice that many of the errors that we are getting before is no longer there. And the reason is because the user has now been given a different group that has the admin permission. Okay, so that's the concept of users. Okay, the concept of groups, the fact that you can have multiple groups and a user can belong to multiple groups, and the user would always inherit all the permissions that come from all those groups. And I've also shared to you what the concept of inline policy is, what the concept of manage your own managed policy is, and what the concept of AWS managed policy is, right? And then what else did I want to share? So let me go back to the presentation. So I think this is clear now. Let's see. So going back, so we've explained, I think by now we understand what a managed policy is, predefined from AWS, customer managed created by you, the ones you directly embed, right? So we understand that. Hmm. Okay, I think it would be nice for me to, let me just do IAM roles today. I didn't plan to do IAM roles today, but maybe we can just cover this part. So what is now, when you now think about, so we've talked about users, we've talked about groups, and there's no magic to it. A user is really an entity, right? Who has access to your account, right? A user is really someone who has access to your account, right? Group is just a way to group them. So a user can belong to multiple groups and all that. But there's also the concept of IAM roles, okay? And IAM roles is it's one of the the ways AWS would always encourage for you to provision. Not everybody, I know in most cases, there's users still need to exist, but one of the core ways services interact with themselves is using roles. Okay, and roles is a kind of it's a bit special, it's a special concept. But what it just means is just an IAM identity. Remember, I told you identity and access management. Everything we'll be looking at a user's identity, like identity from a user, and then identity from the perspective of a group, right? And then we talked about access, the things from the policies we gave them, the things they could have access to, right? But there is also an identity that comes in the form of a role, right? So instead of that role, unlike a user where if you are there, it's like a long time, it's like more or less like you are accessing the application for a long time, right? More or less like it's a long term credential. But that's where IAM come in, because IAM is something that is like an identity that gives you like more or less like a specific set of permissions, but you can only use it for a short period of time. Okay, it's for a short period of time, and mostly you use it when one service needs to communicate with another service. But sometimes too, there's a concept of maybe a user assuming a role to do things. Okay, but just know, so you know that a role is there as an entity that can be temporarily used, right, to do something for a short period of time. So whenever you think about doing something for a short period of time, there's no point creating a user, a standard user. But again, sometimes a user still needs to assume a role. But for the most part, a role really shines when you need service to service communication. So if one service needs to talk to another service, it can't assume a user, right? It can't become a user. A service will need like a role to do something in the AWS account. Okay, so it's designed to be assumed for temporary permissions, right? So basically, it's temporary. It's just for a period of time. And then if I was to assume that role, for example, I can get credentials from it, and I can use that same credential to interact with my account. So that specific is an identity, is an entity. It has specific permissions, but it's for short-time credentials. Okay, and then mostly used for inter-service communications. And where do you really use them? Basically, service accessing other services. So, for example, like if one service needs to access another service, that's one place you use it. And then cross-account access. Remember, everything we'll be doing is just one account, right? But as you guys are creating your own account, we will get to a point whereby we could even test stuff. I can make you access something from your own account to my own account, right? I can make you access my own account from your own account. The only way you can do that is using roles. So I can create a role here and allow you to assume that role from your own account, and because of that, you can do some things. Okay, but that's some complex subject for now. Then identity federation, like I mentioned, is when you federate an identity, right? And then once you federate them into your account, you can tell them once you get into the account, this is your role, right? And then that role already has permissions under it. Okay, and then with that role, you can do whatever you want to do. So let's see what that looks like. Let's see what that looks like. So if I go back to my original account right here, my root account, remember the other guy is already an administrator, so I could as well just use that account. Remember I told you accounts are meant to be used for, what do you call it? Accounts are meant to be used for um, account are meant to your administrative account that is not your administrative users that are non-root users are meant for your daily task. Okay, so I won't do most of the things here. If I go back here, because this guy is already an admin, what I can do is I can go to, I don't know if he'll be able to do like role management at this point. Let me see. Maybe he can create roles. Let's see. He can't create a role. Um, okay. But a good way for me to show you what I'm really talking about is if I go here and I create a Lambda function. Yeah, leave. Right. I always like to use Lambda because it's very, very easy. Right. Um, right now I didn't really generate. Let's see. Um, okay. So let me just go and create a Lambda function. Okay. I didn't really create one, but let's see. I could have topic describe SNS topic with Python basically. So let me just leave Amazon Q to be doing its own, and let me just do SNS function, for example. So I just need it to be a Python function, Python 3.3. I don't really care about the ARM. Right now, did you notice that now there is like a create new role with basic permissions, right? So it's going to create, and we'll see what that role looks like. So we'll do it and we'll see what that role looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to create that. So create function. What did I call the function? SNS function, right? It's creating the function. So let's give it time to create the function. So you see what a role is. A role is just basically something. Remember, Lambda is not a user, but it needs to do something on our behalf. The question is now, which role we really use, right? So that's where Lambda shines. So let's see. Let's see what this one is saying. It says blah blah blah. This is a Lambda handler. Let's see. So let's look for. I think we did create an SNS topic before. So let's go. I know some of these things are things that you not. it's not something you see, but let's see. This is topics. It's here. Okay. Okay, so one thing you do is that I go to configuration, for example, and I check permissions, right? It has a role. So this is really the concept of a role that we're talking about. A role has been attached to that Lambda function. A role has been attached. Now, remember, Lambda function is a service in AWS, right? But remember, a service might want to talk to another service. That's where the concept of role comes in, because why? You don't need a user in that place. You need something that the Lambda will inherit temporarily, does its stuff, and then it can go back and sleep, right? So that's a good use case of role because it provides really short time credential, right? That you can assume just for a short period of time. So in this case, we already know this page, right? Because this is like a role, right? And then we're looking at the permission. Let's look at the permission. The permission is simple right now. Basically, it's just, it says I can create log group, right? I can also create log stream. I can put log events. That's what the Lambda function is doing right now. The role that is attached to the Lambda function. Okay. And remember that here, I was talking to Amazon Q and I looked for a sample because, yeah, I wasn't preparing to demo this part. But now that you give me, let me see what the sample code is. So it said, I should get my topic ARN, blah, 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 right? So I need a topic ARN to put here. And then it's trying to describe the topic ARN. And if there's an exception, it should error it out. So let's look for a topic. I think we created a topic before. So let's look for this topic. This is the ARN here. So I'll copy it here and I'll put it there. And I'll try to just execute the function the way it is. So I'm going to paste it here and then I'll test the function. Come here and I'll test. Hello from Lambda. Did he actually? Oh no, did I deploy? Did I even deploy? Or which one did he test? Let's deploy. Deployment is successful. Now let's test it again. Let's see. The first one worked. Interesting. Yes, the second one did not work because I was wondering why is it working. So the first one, if you notice, it worked because I've not deployed the Lambda. But now that I deployed the Lambda, what is he saying? He said you are not authorized. So you are a Lambda function. You are not authorized to do what you are trying to do. Remember, I just on the left, I told Amazon Q to just write a function that would just look for like that would just describe a Lambda like an SNS topic, right? And in this case, it's saying that I'm trying to describe the SNS topic, but you don't have the permission. But if you check here, there is a basic role, right? There is a role that has been attached to that Lambda, right? And if you check, this is the role. So the role is here. There was a role that was created. And if you check the permissions, when we went to the permissions tab, there is just one permission here, right? So entities attached is here. Let's go back to roles. Sorry, where is that role again? I think it's back here. Yeah, this is a policy. I'm looking for the role basically. Okay, let me search for the role. There's a role here that was created before. Let's see. I think it's this one. What's the name of that role again? I just want to use the wrong role, so let me go and look for it. I think it's under configuration, permission. Yeah, it's this role, SNS function role. So it's here that was created. So when you see the permission right now, it has only Lambda basic permission, and that's what we were trying to see. And we saw that permission has what? It has just these things. I think I've showed you this before. But what again I can do is basically go back to that function and increase the permission. Okay, here. And I can add more permission. Attach policies in this case. And then I can give you that customer managed one that we created. So here is the customer managed policy. I'll add the permission, and that's it. So now that Lambda role now has two permissions, the basic execution and the customer managed policy. What do you think will happen when I go back and I test the function again? If I test here, yeah, it succeeded this time. You can see the status code is 200, right? So a role is something, it's like an entity that you can assume. So in this case, a Lambda function is assuming that role and using that role to talk to SNS. Okay, so that's one identity we would also see. Remember, we talked about a user, we talked about a group, and just know that role is what can give you temporary credential. Because think about it, once this Lambda is done executing, right, that's it. It doesn't really need the credentials again. So what it does is that it assumes a role, does what it has to do, and then once it's done, that's it. Okay, surprisingly, this is like taking you a bit just so that you get the concepts like in full. Because ideally, at this stage, I'm supposed to just introduce the subject for you, what a role is, what a group is, what a user is. But I actually wanted to show you some, some little entities, like just so that you understand it real time, what it is doing. So a role is basically an identity. So if you go into IAM, it's an identity you can create. So we were here before. I'm going to check IAM. So if you check in IAM, on the left, there are groups. We've touched groups, right? We've touched users, and there's also roles. Okay. Remember that the roles we used was given to us, but we can create our own. So there's nothing that stops us from creating a role. We can as well create a role, for example, that has a given name, give it a particular permission, and let that Lambda function use the role. But the beauty of it is that the credential, the role is going to, the Lambda function is going to get is a temporary credential. And once it's done, it's released. The credential is released back. Okay. So it's another way you can do it. But on the user part, most of the things you do is long-term credential. I've been in this account for a while. I'm logged in and I'm still doing stuff, right? But that's not the concept of role is to shorten. So in most cases, roles are always recommended. It's only if a role does not fit the use case, that's when you need to use a user or use like any other of those concepts. But most times, AWS recommends you to use roles. Okay. Also, there is one thing that I think I did not mention at the beginning, but I wanted to stress it now. It's at the beginning of the slide, so I'm going to go back there. So let me go back there. I think when I was preparing the slide, I took it way forward instead of here. Instead of it to be, yes, I need to share this page. So it was supposed to be something I shared at the end, but I have to share it now. So when you created your root user account, I don't know if you know, but there is a place in that account you are meant to go there. You can set a a password policy, and it's a concept I want you to know because you see it in your certification exams. You see it, especially even at this stage that you are. What is a password policy? It's just basically password policy. Basically, a policy that can ensure that the users within your account follow a standard practice, right? So that their credentials are good and it cannot be tampered or more or less like you're trying to protect the credentials people are using in your platform. Okay. Remember, you are the root user, there's an account, but you're creating other users and you want them to be able to come into the account. Here is where you set a policy for them to use. So in this case, for example, you can say the minimum length, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. You can enforce the complexity, right? You can say you want a mixture of uppercase. You can set the expiration, like how long will the password expire, so that it forces the user to create a new password. Right? You can also put policies that prevent reuse, meaning if the person has used this password before in the last 5 passwords, don't let him use it again. Okay, and then remember, everything we're talking about is global scope. I think I've mentioned that severally. IAM is global. If you create one, it's not, you don't go to, it's really for the account. It's not per region. Okay. So if I go back to my account, let me just give this a place called account settings. Okay. And then there is a setting called password policy. And basically, you as a root user, you're only just trying to set a policy for the passwords that people will be using within the account. So if I come here and I edit, this is where you can, there is the default. So maybe the default is good enough for you. In this case, I don't really have a custom one, right? But you can also go in there and set a custom one and say minimum characters should be this number of characters. You should require maybe at least one uppercase, require at least lowercase, whatever it is. Maybe require at least one number. You can use this to push up the password strength. You can also turn on expiration, like after how many days should the password expire. Okay, you can set that on here. You can also say if the password expiration requires the administrator to reset it. And do you want users to be able to change their own password? It's a setting you can have. And then you can also say you want to prevent users from reusing password. And here is when you can decide between numbers 1 to 24 to say, like in the last passwords that you have used, if you've used this number of times, I'm not going to allow you reuse it again. So this is where you can prevent the user from using a password the person has already used before. And then you can put a number limit in there. So I just wanted to add this as something, especially if you have a root user account, I think you should set this. But again, I know most times when you have root user account, you're also the one creating additional users for yourself, right? So maybe this is not important, but if this was like an organization, you have like a password policy around the organization whereby people can choose, like when you're creating a password, it enforces you to follow these rules here, okay? So you're also going to see, you might see it in an exam where they are saying, okay, just know that password policy is just a way to enforce like the use of a strong password, okay? In case you ever find it in any of your exams. So that's it. I wouldn't want to go further because the longer we go, the more these things might become very difficult for you to take in, right? But I think for today, let me recap what we've done. So we've introduced IAM, right? We've introduced the concept of users, the concept of groups, the concept of policies, and then we also explained the types of policies that are out there. AWS managed policies, your own policies, inline policies. And then we also went as far as using like a role, what a role does for you and the role it plays for you in an account. And then I also stopped by saying that password policy is something you need within an account because it helps the other users it helps them control the password they create. So that you're just trying to ensure that they're not using simple password. Because if that password is compromised, the person is already in your account, right? And you're trying to protect that. So yeah, that's it.